It's time to learn the art of deception.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Fighters, welcome back to another deck profile, and today we're finally gonna wrap up Fighters Deleter with the updated version of Zanbaku. For anybody that is interested in an updated version of the Mandala Lord, and I got some requests for that specific deck profile, I have a blog post over at Patreon where you can see the deck list with the different strategies like we usually do in video format like this video, but it's over at Patreon, and to get access to that specific blog post, the only thing you need to do is become a patron over at our Patreon channel. Now for the latest Zanbaku build, overall it's not really that revolutionary and new in context of what the deck does, but it's a lot more consistent and a lot more deadlier with the latest edition of the Shirayuki engine as well as Zangeki. So without further ado, let's just dive into this new list and all the different approaches and strategies you can do with these new cards, as there are some interesting things to talk about, but overall we should be familiar with the basic know-hows of how the deck will function. So for this Zanbaku list, we run a total of 9 grade 3s, 12 grade 2s, 12 grade 1s, and 17 grade 0s. We of course run 4 copies of Dueling Dragon Zanbaku. This is basically the main boss monster of the deck and your main ride target, as it allows us to lock our opponent to either out of normal ride, so they can gain any type of imaginary gift markers, or to completely lock them out of a Vanguard for a turn, so you can whittle them down and basically kill them on the second turn. We also run 3 copies of the new Fantasy Petal Storm Shirayuki. This is an amazing card not only for defensive, but also for offensive plays. And this minusing power can basically save or kill games. And the fact that we can search her out with the support grade 2 makes it even better, as we can filter our deck for more specific cards. And lastly, we run 2 copies of the newly Dueling Dragon King Zangeki. Once again, a great finisher for the deck after his Zanbaku stun turn, but also a great normal ride target, as it can be a potential 70k base, so we have some more defense potential. For the grade 2s, we of course run 4 Left Arrestor. I think it's very obvious why we do that, and we also run 4 Right Arrestor. There's nothing really to talk about these cards, as we already know that we need both of them for the Zanbaku build, and they are just good offensive tools. But we also run 4 copies of Stealth Fiend Jakotsu Girl, the supporting grade 2 for Shirayuki. This card allows us to fetch Shirayukis to our hand from our deck, or we can soul charge, and we can use that soul for multiple cards like Zanbaku himself, also for Left Arrestor, or more importantly Shirayuki herself. So overall a very good support card. For the grade 1 lineup, we run 4 copies of Stealth Beast Million Red. This is a great early game aggression tool, but also another way to fill out more attackers later down the road when we use a Shirayuki turn, or to just filter our deck even more. We also run 4 copies of the new promo Cornered Stealth Rogue Benijishi. This is a great offensive tool right out of the get-go when we can put it onto the field, as we basically tell our opponent that they are locked out of perfect guards, because we're just gonna get another attack if they do that. And lastly, we run 4 copies of Stealth Fiend Rainy Madame, the supporting grade 1 for Shirayuki. Once again, a very good card to fix Shirayuki back to her hand after it's been dropped into the drop zone, and it also is another way to fill out her soul. For the grade 0s, we run of course the obvious starter Cat Devil, and for the trigger lineups, I personally run 4 heals, 6 crits, and 6 draws, making a total of 9 grade 3s, 12 grade 2s, 12 grade 1s, and 17 grade 0s. Just like the previous version of Zanbaku, this deck doesn't focus on complex plays and combos. It's all about generating value and tempo while destroying value or tempo from your opponent, be it through the ride lock, stand lock, Shirayuki minus ability, or the guard restrict from Zangeki. Whenever you ride to a grade 3, your opponent is in a world of hurt. Resource management is pretty good in this deck, although you don't have a countercharger. Counterblast won't be an issue in most cases, as soon as you only have 2 units that actively use it. I'm treating Right Arrestor as an extension of Zanbaku's skill. Soul shouldn't be an issue in most matches, as you have the Shirayuki engine in this deck, but it might come up that you need to make a choice to either use Shirayuki's skill or keep the guard restrict from Zangeki active if you're low on soul. So always keep paying attention when using her skill, or just Soul Blast in general. The overall strategy for this deck stays the same in most cases, only the deck has some more deadlier tools to its disposal. We lose the powerful Musashi and Fushimi cards, but in return we get not only the Shirayuki engine, but also the destructive Zangeki finisher. Overall, the Zanbaku lock works the same way as it always did, but instead where you wanted to follow it up with a Mandala Lord right and a multiple Musashis, nowadays you can either write into a Shirayuki and go to town when their hand is low, or go into a Zangeki if you go into an established board. However, what is significantly changed is the meta environment. A couple of decks can counter the complete lock. Gears, Angels, Golds, and even RNG Royals can break the complete lock. And besides that, some decks can still get value out of their Vanguard even if it's completely locked, like the leader's first grade 3 right target can still delete you. So there are a lot more things out there that can threaten you. So always keep in mind and learn what's the best moment to right lock someone and when to completely lock them for a turn. It all comes down to knowing the matchup. But thanks to Zangeki and Shirayuki, you have a lot more option to close games than just the Vanguard lock play. Speaking of Shirayuki, try to get the advantage engine going from turn 1. So use your Jakotsu girls to fetch your Shirayukis out of your deck as fast as possible, or set up your soul for future Shirayuki plays. Just like Shirayuki, you can filter your deck with the help of Million Red. And speaking of Million Red, when you write a Shirayuki and you use a Million Red, call the 8k to the Accel circle and the 4k to a normal circle. Because this way, to guard the attacks, it will cost a 5k shield and a 20k shield. And in most cases, the 20k will be 2 cards. If you did it the other way around, it will cost 10k shield and 50k shield. That will be in most scenarios just 2 cards. Also, because the shield value is concentrated at the second attack, if the first attack hits a defense trigger, they still need to guard 10k instead of 5k. Another thing to not underestimate is Zangeki as a Vanguard right target. If you can get your arresters to the field, you will have a great offensive as well as a great defense. That 70k base can save you in some clutch matches. And always hitting with a crit is also nothing to sneeze at. However, this is a more risky move as you don't run jamming Impeder, and if your opponent focuses on removing your arresters, you're just left with a vanilla Vanguard if you don't meet the guard restriction. Speaking of jamming Impeder, let's talk about alternative options. Overall, you can build a deck in multiple ways, but if you want to include the Shirayuki engine, you're basically stuck to a linear grade 3 and grade 2 lineup. Although you can switch up the grade 3 lineup by running maybe more Zangekis or Shirayukis, or just drop Zangeki in its entirety. In the grade 1 slots, you're a bit more free, but I recommend keeping it at these grade 1s, as jamming Impeder isn't a great card if you run the Shirayuki engine, because most of the time you're just wasting soul without getting a arrestor to your hand. Amatsu Snipe is a good option to replace Benijishi if you want to have a more aggro playstyle that doesn't rely on your opponent's input. And for triggers, you can go for more crits, and I've seen people having success with 6 fronts as well. So experiment with it. There isn't a definitive good lineup for this deck. Although Murakumo got a bunch of new cards, the Zanbaku build itself hasn't really changed that much. The core pieces and playstyle stays the same, but it got more deadlier thanks to the new Shirayuki engine and Zangeki. And that finished the upgraded Zanbaku build. As you can see, the overall build doesn't really change that much, and the general flow and concept of the deck hasn't basically changed at all for what Zanbaku was doing before in the first AL4 set, but it got a lot more nastier tricks up its sleeve, as well as a little bit more consistency, because you can now filter your deck for multiple cards. You can go for arresters, Million Red, but now also for the Shirayukis. And that is pretty big. And Shirayuki herself can do in a lot of work, so you shouldn't underestimate her and her support cards. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of this deck profile and what Zanbaku can do in general. Do you run do you still like to prefer some Musashis in the build? Do you have a different strategy approach? There are a lot of different things you can do, and I'm very curious of what you guys can come up with. So let me know in the comments down below your general input on the newly Zanbaku build. As always, I want to thank my patrons over at Patreon. You guys are amazing in supporting me in doing this for all you guys. If you too want to support me, then go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and start supporting us today. As I stated before in the beginning of the video, you get access to some special content over Patreon, and a good example of that is a newly Mandala Lord build that I have put up onto Patreon with all the information that you need to know. So the deck list in its entirety, as well as some strategies, tips, and player maneuverability for the deck as well. Basically, the entire video that you see now, but then in a blog post format for the newly Mandela Lord build. So if you're interested in stuff like that and you want to support the show, then go to patreon.com/Vanguard Insider and become a patron starting today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I'll see you guys in the next one.